In the early 1900s, government, welfare bodies, and even churches took part in forcibly removing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. The policy was intended to assimilate or breed out Indigenous people. An estimated 100,000 children were taken from their families and placed in institutions, foster homes, or mission dormitories.
This removal was managed by the Aborigines Protection Board. The APB had the power to remove these children without parental consent and without a court order, never to see their families again. These children became known as the Stolen Generation.
In an effort to breed out the Indigenous people and make Australian society more civilized, Aboriginal people that were not full-blood, also known as half-castes, were forced to become assimilated into the European society so that eventually there would be no more Indigenous people left.
These children were ripped from their parents and made to reject their Aboriginality and made to be brought up white. At the time, Indigenous people were considered an inferior race. The lack of understanding and respect for the Aboriginal people and their culture led to the European people supporting the childhood removals.
These supporters believed that the Aboriginal people were bad parents and did not look after their children. The racist views in both society and the government ratified the belief that they were doing the right thing. Many of these children were placed in institutions and were expected to become laborers and servants.
Aboriginal girls were being sent to be trained in domestic services. One woman remembers her experience saying, "We was bought like a market, we was all lined up in white dresses, and they would come around and pick you up like you was for sale."
The boys were called inmates in many of the official reports. When they arrived at the homes, their heads were shaved, any possessions they had were taken away, and they were officially referred to by a number.
These children were told that they were now orphans. They were given minimal education, poor food, and deplorable living conditions. They were forbidden to see their families, follow their culture, or even speak their language. They were forced into domestic or farming work, and often physically or sexually abused. Many had grown up in hostile environments without family ties of any kind and no cultural identity.
Many studies show the irreparable damages caused by the forced removal on Indigenous communities. The great majority of Indigenous children suffered lifelong negative consequences.
People who are members of the Stolen Generations have been shown to have worse health, shorter lifespans, and are more likely to suffer from depression or be imprisoned.
Although according to the Bringing Them Home report of 1997, some members of the Stolen Generation were thankful for the opportunities that were given to them. Others felt broken by their experiences.
Memories of being ripped from their families and being emotionally, physically, or sexually abused have taken their toll. The impact has been passed on to families who suffered the loss of the children and to next generations whose parents were part of the Stolen Generation.
The disconnection from their land and language meant loss of culture for many. Those who tried to return to their Aboriginal communities were often not welcomed back or had trouble settling into Aboriginal life.
One person interviewed stated, "A lot of people say that they don't know exactly what they are, whether they're white or they're black, or where exactly they belong."
When the Bringing Them Home report was released in 1997, the current Prime Minister, John Howard, refused to make an official apology. He instead passed a statement of regret and motion of reconciliation.
Aboriginal rights activists argued that it was important to recognize the truth about Australia's history for any hopes of moving forward, to which Prime Minister John Howard stated the current generation should not be responsible for the mistakes of the past.
In 2007, after a new government was elected, Parliament promised to make an official apology to the Stolen Generations. On February 13, 2008, the new Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, finally issued an official apology on behalf of the Australian government.
Although the Australian government took so much time to apologize, the apology was appreciated by the majority of both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
Today we honour the Indigenous peoples of this land, the oldest continuing cultures in human history. We reflect on their past mistreatment. We reflect in particular on the mistreatment of those who were stolen generations, this blemished chapter in our national history. We apologise especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families, their communities, and their country. For the pain, suffering, and hurt of these stolen generations, their descendants, and for their families left behind, we say sorry. To the mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, for the breaking up of families and communities, we say sorry. And for the indignity and degradation thus inflicted on a proud people and a proud culture, we say sorry.